talking to Jason Churchill. We got like a minute left here, but give me some name. I know you're high on what the Mariners have done with their farm system here in the last few years and what Jerry's done to restock this thing. Give me some names that aren't, the big couple that are either going to make a difference very soon for Seattle from the minor league level and coming up to the majors and will have some success, or somebody that Jerry could target elsewhere in the league that we haven't been talking about.
Yeah, when you're talking about from the farm system, I think a guy like Brandon Williamson gets overlooked a little bit. I've been talking about that quite a bit on my podcast. Relatively close to the big leagues. He sat 91 and 94, but the club thinks there's more there, and if they can get to a point where a 6'6", 215-pound left-hander is throwing downhill with, 4 average or better pitches and a 93 to 96 mile-an-hour fastball, that's a pretty good arm that probably sits in the middle-liter rotation, but perhaps even better. And that's something right now that it's difficult to project, but they just think there's more there in the fastball, and they really like the metrics on all of his pitches. So he's a guy to kind of keep an eye on. I have him ranked number 7 right now. But in most other organizations, he would be top 4 or 5. That's a pretty good left-hander there to kind of toss into the conversation. As far as like looking out and like I think we've learned with Jerry Dipoto that when you're trying to look around the league for things that the Mariners might be able to do, you have to turn over every rock because that's exactly what they're going to do is turn over every single rock, probably rocks we're not even thinking of. So I've actually had a difficult time as a guy who literally stares at spreadsheets and tries to look for these sorts of things. It's really hard to find something that hasn't been talked about. I've been talking about the red starters for a couple of years. I think Sonny Gray makes sense. I think Luis Castillo makes sense. I think Mahle makes sense. So keep an eye on that, and keep an eye on Cincinnati for a lot of reasons because they're trying to cut payroll. They're letting Castellanos walk. If you could do something creative, and I'll throw this at you, Mike. You've probably seen this before, but it's been suggested. If you're making a deal with the Reds and you're trying to get Luis Castillo, for example, that's not really going to help them cut payroll that much. But if you're willing to take on a good portion of, if not all of, the remaining money on Mike Moustakas' deal, you might be able to add both of those players, have a league average third baseman in Mike Moustakas, add a number 2, number 3 starter in Luis Castillo, and not have to pay the prospect rate that you otherwise would.
I love that. I would love to see them do something along those lines. Use that payroll for good to bring in the kind of players you need without giving up the other assets that you